Hi, I'm Mick Bolton, the founder of ICCS, and continuing this series on the seven-eyed model, we're going to look at I4 in this video. Now, I4 is the coach's experience of the coaching that's taking place. In other words, the person that's in front of you, your supervisee, how are they experiencing the work they do with their client, and what's going on for them internally that affects the coaching that might need to be explored within the supervision. So you could think of this as a very classic approach to coaching, where what you're really doing is drawing out the phenomenological experience of the person in front of you to understand how their experience shapes the interaction they have with the world, or in this case, with their coaching client. So we might look at things like their emotional response, their triggers, their biases, their assumptions, their repetitive patterns, their thought processes, their habits, and their go-to models, all of which might combine in different ways to impact the coaching that's happening with the client that perhaps needs to be loosened up in some way or needs to be explored in some way, because it's the coach's internal world and their own habits and beliefs and assumptions and knowledge that is shaping the coaching in a way that's more or less effective. So this is the time to really bring out the person that's right in front of you and explore what is going on. So what might be some of the themes that we look at when we're taking a look at I4? Well, a really classic one is imposter syndrome. I remember reading an article by Nick Smith many years ago in which he talks about the deference threshold. Now, the deference threshold is the point where, as a coach, you start to coach a client who you start to put on a pedestal in some way, who you find yourself feeling disempowered by, you feel childlike in front of, you feel like you're not good enough, etc., because somehow this deference threshold has been breached by this client. And of course, when we're supervising, we can help that coach come back to themselves and realize, no, that client's there for a reason. There's something they need from us. There's something they want from us. There's something they see in us. And this deference threshold issue is ours. It's not something that's necessarily happening between. Now, by the way, in the last video, we looked at I3, and it could be that the deference threshold is an I3 issue, because you might find this client produces that deference threshold in multiple scenarios. But that's another issue. Right now, we're talking about I4, which is what's happening for the coach that might trigger some form of imposter syndrome, some form of deference threshold, breach, etc., etc. So that's one potential area. Another area might be their biases and their assumptions. It might be that when they coach a certain kind of person, they make certain assumptions about them. Not necessarily negatively. It could be they assume they're competent, or they assume they're incompetent, or they assume they're going to achieve certain things, or they assume they're not going to achieve certain things. It doesn't really matter, but there's a set of assumptions that coach might have about that individual, about that organization, about that cultural context, about whatever it might be, that needs to be unpicked in some way. Now, another area that you might want to explore when you're looking through I4 is the triggers, the emotional triggers. What might happen to that coach or for that coach which triggers some kind of emotional response? Maybe the client acts in a certain way or reacts in a certain way that makes the coach go, whoa, and have an emotional response that is somehow detrimental or ineffective to the coaching. So when we're looking at these triggers, it's really important to say, well, is this a relational trigger, or is it a internal trigger? In other words, is it something that's happening? Is it something the coach carries around from place to place to place? Or is it something that's unique to this relationship, which could be an I3 issue as much as an I4 issue? So as we start to unpick this experience that the coach has of the client, of the context, of the coach that's unfolding, we can start to find what are the little tweaks that need to be made, or what are the threads that need to be pulled or explored in order for the coaching to go where it needs to go. And don't forget, in supervision, we're not looking for the sake of looking. We're looking for the benefit of the coaching system. And that means the coach, the client, the system they're part of, and of course, to some degree, the profession itself. So we're always looking at these different dimensions to the coaching that's unfolding. Now, as an experienced coach, you probably already have a sense of, well, what might we do with this information once we've begun to bring it out into the light? Well, of course, there are a number of things. One of the things the coach could do once they start to become aware of this is to put strategies in place to self-manage, to become more aware of their biases or their assumptions, or become more confident in themselves, to step into an adult emotional space rather than a parent-child emotional space, depending on what the thing is. So by opening up, we start to allow for strategies to be explored by that coach to become more aware of everything that's happening for them and therefore begin to become more effective in the coaching. So I4 is a really critical place. Now, it's also worth saying that it's often an I that a lot of newer supervisors will overprivilege. The reason for that, I think, is that as a coach, the person you are most concerned with is the person in front of you, which is your client. When you become a supervisor, you try to hold the whole system in view. But actually, this person that's right in front of you still dominates your visual perception and your emotional connection. So it's quite likely that you'll overprivilege I4 because that's the person that's right in front of you. So as a supervisor, one of the things I often say is make sure that you are balancing as necessary the eyes you're looking through and that you're not overprivileging one area because it's easier and more habitual. So that's I4. I hope that was helpful. And in the next video, we'll take a look at I5, which is the relationship between the coach and the supervisor. Thanks very much. See you on the next one.